Hello, in this video we will discuss about the meningitis. So this is the basically we will focus on the bacterial meningitis and we will discuss also the type of meningitis. So this is a brain which that's surrounded by skull, contain osteocyte, the bone. So this is the arterioles which that is surrounded the brain and you imaginate into the subarachnoid space. So remember subarachnoid space. So this is the pile membrane, and this is contain pile matter, and this is the parenchyma, which that's contain a brain. So this blue color is showing in the basically inside the, it is known as the circumventricular organs. The circumventricular organ contain basically the lateral ventricle. This lateral ventricle produces the cerebrospinal fluid, and this is not contain blood-brain barrier. So that is why the bacteria can invaginate also via this function. So in this way, the cerebrospinal fluid will produce from the lateral ventricle, go into the third ventricle. After going to the third ventricle, go into the fourth ventricle. So remember, the epidermal cell produce the cerebrospinal fluid. So the subarachnoid space. So this is the cerebral spinal fluid surrounded by the brain. So let's begin to understand the bigger picture of the cerebrospinal fluid where is the present. So subarachnoid space contains cerebrospinal fluid. How it's produced, we will also learn. So this is the subarachnoid space between here is the subdural space. So between the biomatter and arachnoid matter, this contain meninges. So meninges contain subarachnoid space which that's contain a cerebrospinal fluid. So this is the arachnoid matter and this is the pia matter. Between the arachnoid and pia is the subarachnoid space which that's contain a cerebrospinal fluid which that release from the subarachnoid space go into the, here you can see this is the cerebral artery. So this is the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex inside is the yellowish color, you can see to move inside is the cerebral cortex, the part of brain. So this is the superior sagittal sinus which that receive the cerebrospinal fluid also for circulation into the blood circulatory system. So here you can understand, this is the more closer picture to understand the endothelial cell, the capillary, and will produce the will receive the brain from glucose, nutrient, oxygen when go into the cerebrospinal fluid to the parenchymal area, the brain. So this is very important for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. While here is the perivascular area. This perivascular area which that's contain basically the blood vessel. So this is the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier is very important. We will also learn. So this is the subarachnoid space. This subarachnoid space is here. You can understand. So this is the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, as a barrier like a blood-brain barrier. So let's begin to understand the blood-brain barrier. This is the inside is the blood-brain barrier. Inside is the blood, while outside is the brain. Inside is the brain, which that is basement membrane of the endothelial cell. So the tight junction between them for increase the blood-brain barrier. What is the blood-brain barrier? Blood-brain barrier means the passive transport of the fluid will not allow. So the active can be moved, but the passive will not allow. It means the water retention will be maintained, while the sodium will not move inside. So the swelling will be impossible in the brain. So on the other hand, here you can see this is the circulatory system that's contain a blood vessel, and the basement membrane is the orange color, and this surrounded via astrocyte. Astrocyte is also protective for the blood-brain barrier. So this when the bacteria will move into the blood circulatory system, but it will not pass. It will not pass on. But in this case, you can understand when the basically go into the circumventricular organs. So here is a, for example, this is the center basically circumventricular organs. So here is the no blood brain barrier are present, but the cerebrospinal fluid are present. The cerebrospinal fluid is released from the epidermal cell. So remember, so this cerebrospinal fluid will release. In this way, the bacteria can invaginate easily due to the inflammation the cytokines will produce, will damage the endothelial cell, will move. While here the glucose and oxygen can transport through with the blood-brain barrier. So this is the basement membrane, but it will allow to oxygen move and the glucose. So this is the endothelial cell. So when the bacteria will move inside from digestive system or injured skin, so in this way we will not understand about how it will be moved from the digestive system, but you can understand. So in this way it will be permeability will increase due to the inflammation will lead to move into the cerebrospinal fluid. So when go into the cerebrospinal fluid, here is I am drawing that structure. Where is the cerebrospinal fluid? Which that is between the pia mater and the arachnoid matter, contains subarachnoid space. This subarachnoid space contain meninges because dural matter and dural matter to down the basically the arachnoid to the pia mater, but between the arachnoid and pia mater the subarachnoid space is here. So we will understand in the subarachnoid space which that contains cerebrospinal fluid. So this is the basement membrane, and this is the bigger picture of the subarachnoid space containing blood vessel. This is the blood vessel contain a junction, is the tight junction which that will increase the blood-brain barrier. So inside is the blood contain red blood cell and other things, but it will not transfuse into the passively into the cerebrospinal fluid. So the cerebrospinal fluid contain less protein and less sodium and less and normal water, not more water, because remember, because the protein negative charge containing protein and sodium will not enter, so it means the water will not move more. So here the pathogen will enter into the cerebrospinal fluid. The pathogen associated molecular pattern will recognize through a pattern recognition receptor through macrophage. Because the macrophage are also present in the cerebrospinal fluid and also enter toward the inflammation site and to produce the interleukin 1 beta, CXCL1 and 2 and C5 alpha. And this cytokine will increase the inflammation to the cell. Also the infected cell will create the inflammation for recruitment of the neutrophil, the polymorphonuclear granulocyte also known as. So this is the here is the thrombocytes are also present, produce thrombin for the blood clotting. So this is the polymorphonuclear granulocyte will bind with the receptor to permeability will increase due to the production of cytokines. And this permeability due to the tight junction resolving the tight junction decrease will move the permeability between the blood-brain barrier and the water will move into the cerebrospinal fluid will lead to also a permeability of the protein movement. This protein movement means that lead to more water retention and more pathogen will move inside due to the permeability, will recruit more macrophage. And this granulocyte infiltration of the pathogen and other things, other debris will proteolytic enzymes, proteolytic enzyme breakdown and oxidant produce will lead to cytolytic cell death, apoptosis. So the erythrocytosis also occur due to the macrophage, while on the other hand the death associated molecular pattern, for example the HMGB1, which that is erythrocytosis, by a macrophage, while on the other hand here is the cerebral bleeding will be caused due to the leakage of the blood. RBC will enter into the cerebral spinal fluid, and in this way cause the shock, and the edema will more, and on the other hand the brain hemorrhage will be occur, and there are a lot of things. So here is the thrombosis will be formed due to the thrombin will be activated due to the thrombocytes produce the thrombin protein, and in this way the coagulation will be occur, and the clotting will be occur due to the clotting factors, and in this way the vasospasm will be occur, and in this way thrombosis will lead to ischemia. The low oxygen level will lead to cause the endothelial cell death and blood clotting due to thrombin activation. So this will lead to cause the coma and trauma or other processes. So anyhow, let's begin to understand the type of meningitis. So the bacterial is Streptococcus pneumonia, Listeria, Staphylococcus aureus, and the meningitis related bacteria. On the other hand, the viral infection is caused due to the influenza virus, mumps, HIV virus, measles, herpes, and coldivirus. Parasitic is the Balisascaris, Procyonis, and the Gnathostoma, Spiningirum, and on the other hand, the fungal is the Cryptococcus, Blastomyces, Histoplasma, and the coccidioids. And on the other hand, the chroning is the longer than 4 weeks, and it is lethal meningitis. And non-infection can be lupus, head injury, cancer, and medication. This all thing is related to the basically we had discussed about the bacterial meningitis. So the bacterial meningitis is due to the bacterial infection via entry from the cerebrospinal fluid.